Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome in to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It is Thursday, January 28th, and this is the last show of January here in 2021. We're cruising right along, baby. Spring training, pitchers and catchers will be here before you know it, but until that time, we got a great show lined up for you here today. We're going to be talking Hall of Fame voting results, giving you guys the updates on everything that took place on Tuesday evening when the ballots were released. Then we're going to get into the big signing of the week, which was JT Realmuto to the Phillies. I'll be able to talk about my local squad here in a bit more detail. Then we'll touch base on all the other additional signings that happened and wrap things up with news, notes, rumors, and where we think everything else is going to play out here in the next month or so. But thanks again for listening. Let's jump right in here today. Like I mentioned, first conversation is around the Hall of Fame voting results that came in on Tuesday evening, and it was a rare result where nobody was elected to the Hall of Fame here in 2021. And of course, there are three big names and three big stories to get into here to discuss. But the fact that there was nobody elected, this was the first time that the Baseball Writers Association of America, or the BBWAA, did not elect any players since 2013. And prior to that, it had last happened in 1996. So, this came after a wave of players. There were 22 guys elected between 2014 and 2020. And then, of course, this year came in with 0. And one thing that surprised me was 14 out of 401 submitted ballots were left blank. And that was a record. And I'm going to be honest with you. Those 14 guys should be removed from the process. Honestly, let me start by saying that, my opinions here over the next 10 minutes may not reflect that of my employer, because I think some of you listening to this may get a little bit upset out there. But the fact that 14 guys have the ability or the privilege, I guess I should say, of voting for the Baseball Hall of Fame and left their ballots blank is an absolute embarrassment to themselves and an embarrassment to the game of baseball. Because you couldn't tell me that out of a ballot that includes, the top three of Schilling, Bonds, Clemens, Scott Rowland, Billy Wagner, Gary Sheffield, that you don't feel that any of these players are worthy of entering the Hall of Fame. I'm just absolutely disgusted by that, and the amount of people who would be, up in arms to just get a vote for this particular process. To have 14 individuals not submit a ballot with a name on it is just absolutely befuddling and honestly makes me feel sick to my stomach. So those 14 guys, I know we won't know who they are because the ballot is full of cowards who won't make their ballots public, and I don't know, again, why, because they're clearly ashamed of who they are or not voting for, or they're scared of the backlash. If you don't make your ballot public, I think, again, you should just be removed, and I'm ashamed that you are even part of this process. But overall, that feeling just continues across the board for me here this year. The fact that Curt Schilling was not elected to the Hall of Fame is an absolute disgrace to the process, because you're not voting on who the person is, what type of guy they are, who they support in politics, what they say on social media. You're voting for the guy who played baseball in between the white lines. And Curt Schilling, strictly as a baseball player, is a no-doubt, no-brainer Hall of Famer. The guy's got 216 wins, over 3,000 strikeouts, And in the postseason, he's 11-2 with a 2.23 ERA, one of the best postseason pitchers in the history of baseball. And people are leaving him off of their ballot because, I don't support who he supports for the presidency, or he's a homophobic, xenophobic, this, that, and the third, whatever you want to say it, and whatever's been written on the the internet about Schilling and his preferences. Well, if that's the case, we should probably remove everybody from the Hall of Fame before the Jackie Robinson era, because clearly every one of them was racist. They weren't playing with African Americans. They weren't playing with international players. So let's get all of them out of the Hall of Fame, because they're clearly racist and have horrible character. I mean, let's talk about it. Walter Johnson, Cy Young, every one of them should be removed from the Hall of Fame because they were horrible people who did not want to play with African Americans and forced them to play in the Negro League. I mean, it is just befuddling how society here in 2020 and basically the people that vote for this Hall of Fame have self-described or self-proclaimed themselves as the morality police. Or this guy has steroid connections and this guy tweeted these things. It's just absolutely disgusting that these people feel it is their right to keep a Hall of Fame baseball player out of the Hall of Fame because they do not like who he is as a person. I don't care who you are as a person. Curt Schilling, yeah, not a great guy. I agree with you there. But that's not what this process is about. That's not what we're discussing here. We're voting on Hall of Fame baseball players, not Hall of Fame humans. Now, of course, you want every person to be a good person and improve and be positive and all of that, but that just doesn't happen, okay? We're humans. It's human nature. So for the BBWAA to sit there on their high pedestal that seems to get higher and higher every year, and their head seems to get bigger and bigger, to be like, no, I'm not voting for him because of what he tweeted back in 2016. You are an absolute embarrassment to the sport of baseball. You are an absolute disgrace to this entire process, and your vote should be rescinded immediately. As well as this goes for the other two gentlemen on the ballot, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, the two guys who are most associated with the steroid era here in this outcome. I mean, clearly, both of these guys, I guess, have used steroids, even though Barry Bonds never failed a steroid test. He's never been banged for PEDs. Everybody just assumes, quote unquote, that he was using them. So in a society or a country where you are innocent until proven guilty, apparently that just doesn't happen to Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds is clearly guilty until proven innocent. And again, I'm deciding that as a Hall of Fame voter, that even though he's never failed anything, there's enough dots there that I'm connecting to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. It's just absolutely disgusting. It is gross. And you just can't erase the steroid era in Major League Baseball. You just can't do it. And the fact that Commissioner Bug Selig, who oversaw the steroid era, who clearly looked the other way during the early, mid, late 90s, early 2000s, because he was enjoying the McGwire-Sosa chase back and forth that brought popularity back to the game of baseball, because he was enjoying Barry Bonds chasing then McGwire's home run record, bringing fans into the seats. He gets enshrined into the Hall of Fame, the guy who oversaw the entire steroid era, but the players who actually played in the era when they were doing nothing illegal, again, because steroid testing did not exist at the time, are not allowed in the Hall of Fame. And I decide that as a voter. That's my right to be the morality police once again and say that potentially the best player in the history of baseball, arguably top 5, definitely top 3 in my opinion. I mean, we just talked about Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb. Well, Barry Bonds is up there with all the war accomplishments and everything that we've seen, but he's not allowed in because he played during the era where it's just assumed 100% of the guys, we're doing steroids. And then on the other side, Roger Clemens, 7-time Cy Young Award winner, arguably, again, one of the top 5 or 10 best pitchers in the history of the sport. He's not allowed in because he threw during this time too, and it was clear that he used performance-enhancing drugs. But again, the guy who oversaw it, the leader of the entire organization who just closed his eyes, looked the other way, yeah, let's get him in. Let's have a parade for Mr. Selig. He's fantastic. He brought popularity back to the sport. But the guys who played and were the reason that people actually came in to watch baseball once again and not absolutely crush the sport, they're not allowed in. And also, this gets back to just public, non-public ballots, because the public tracking online, Ryan Thibodeau, I think is how you pronounce his name, they had over 70% votes in the public ballots, but then they come in at 61.6 and 61.0 when it comes to all the ballots. So the half of the ballots that aren't public, it's because you're ashamed or scared or afraid of all the backlash that comes if you were to disclose who you actually voted for in the process. So, number one, make every ballot public, have accountability for one time in your life. Writers Association, be willing to put your name on something that you're actually voting for and not hide in the bushes or hide in the weeds and throw a paper airplane up and over saying, here's my vote list. Wasn't me. No, it just drives me absolutely bananas how this entire voting process works. Because Curt Schilling, no doubt about it, Hall of Famer. Barry Bonds, no doubt about it, Hall of Famer. Roger Clemens, no doubt about it, Hall of Famer. Are they all good guys? I don't think so. Probably not. Did they do something maybe to gain a performance advantage? Yeah, maybe. But again, it's never been proven in Bonds' case, so that's just your goodwill and intuition telling you that it did. It's just so frustrating and embarrassing, and this is why baseball isn't gaining in popularity like basketball or like football, because things like this just put a huge stain on the sport, and it frustrates fans like myself who clearly know what should be happening. But getting out of those top three, getting off of my rant there, again, I mean, if you have comments, questions on that conversation, you want to discuss it further, hit us up in the comments. I'm willing to read. I'm willing to discuss. I want to talk about it with you guys. But a few other storylines that came out here as well. Scott Rowland continues to gain ground, continues to have momentum towards being enshrined. 8-time Gold Glove winner, 7-time All-Star. He was selected on just about 53% of the ballots, up from 35% a year ago. He's benefiting, of course, from everybody getting in from 2014 to 2020. Now, the lesser names, the more votes that Scott Rowland will get, and it'll be fascinating to see if he can jump all the way once again another 20%, or if it'll take probably 2 more years to get Scott Rowland into the Hall. But the other big gainers as well, Todd Helton went from 29.2 to 44.9. Billy Wagner jumped from 31.7 to 46.4. Gary Sheffield went up from 30 to 40. And Andrew Jones went up from 19 to just about 34. So those guys continue to gain ground, continue to have positive momentum. It'll be fascinating to see if they can continue that trajectory, and it certainly looks like 5 of those guys could get in if this continues. I'm not sure, all of them are Hall of Fame worthy, but if they get in and Bonds, Clemens, and Schilling do not, that's just once again another reason why this is so embarrassing to the sport of baseball. So nobody voted in here in 2021, but there will be a ceremony that will enshrine the 2020 class. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, there was not a ceremony last year, so they will be celebrated this year. But I also wanted to discuss the 2022 ballot here briefly before we head out to let you guys know who will be coming on next year, if there will be any first-time ballot Hall of Famers or what we think will play out. So the biggest name added to the list is Alex Rodriguez. Once again, he's performance-enhancing drugs, drug tests, all that good stuff. So if Bonds and Clemens aren't in, A-Rod certainly won't be in, even though he's clearly a Hall of Fame caliber player. 696 home runs, 2,086 RBIs, 14-time All-Star, 3-time MVP. But, again, the morality police will keep him out and say, hey, he's not a good dude, so he's not allowed to be in the Hall of Fame. Next up, you have David Ortiz. 541 home runs, 10-time All-Star, hit .455 in 14 World Series games. Do I think he is a first-ballot Hall of Famer? I do not. Do I think he is a Hall of Famer? Absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where he fits in year one moving next year. And then it gets interesting, right? Then you get to kind of that level where, guys won't be first-ballot guys, but certainly can have consideration moving forward. Mark Teixeira. He has 409 home runs, 5 Gold Gloves. You then have Jimmy Rollins, former MVP, 4 Gold Gloves, 3-time All-Star, 470 stolen bases. Jake Peavy, Carl Crawford, Coco Crisp, Justin Morneau, and Joe Nathan will be the names being added to the list. So A-Rod should be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he won't be. David Ortiz will be on the bubble, and then I think Mark Teixeira and Jimmy Rollins will certainly be fascinating conversations that won't happen first year, but similar to Scott Rowland, I think as we start to look further into their careers, years and years on the ballot, I certainly think that they could have a case and an argument, because Jimmy Rollins, I didn't think he was a Hall of Famer, and then you look at some statistics, and he's one of one or one of two shortstops to ever, accomplish certain feats when it comes to statistics. But man, just wrapping things up here, it's just a shame, honestly. Like I said, Schilling, not a good dude. I 100% agree with that, but I'm not voting on you as a person to get into the Hall of Fame. I'm voting on you as a player. And then with the PED era, the fact that the commissioner is in the Hall of Fame, but none of the players are, is just a black stain on everything regarding Cooperstown. So please do the right thing next year. BBWAA, please figure it out. Allow more younger voters, and the people who didn't submit a ballot or did that was blank, get them out of here. Remove them from the process. That's just the biggest stain and biggest embarrassment to this entire thing. But that'll wrap things up here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll step aside right now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we're talking Philadelphia Phillies and JT Realmuto. Finally, I get to discuss my fightin' Phils in some detail here. So stick around, everyone. We'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys listening in. If you have a comment or a question based on that first segment, hit us up on wherever you're listening to this, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify. There's a comment section, and while you're doing that, please rate and review the podcast. Click that subscribe button. Send this to one of your friends. Say, hey, man, you got to check out this rant for the first 15 minutes. Let me know if you agree or disagree, because I'm sure there's going to be reactions out there to that take I just threw out there in segment number 1. So if you guys want to get involved, have your voice heard, leave us a comment. I'll read it here on the show. We'll talk about it. We'll have a fan interaction segment. I think that would be a lot of fun, as I don't want to be yelling at you guys here all the time moving forward. But here we are in segment number 2, and like I mentioned, finally able to discuss those Philadelphia Phillies. They have joined the party this offseason, and now this has not yet been official by the team here, but sources say the Phillies and catcher JT Realmuto are in an agreement on a 5-year, $115.5 million contract, and I emphasize that 0.5 because that 0.1 per year is what makes it the highest average annual value in the history of Major League Baseball for the catcher's position. Realmuto had just beaten out Joe Mauer's contract, or his extension, that he signed with the Minnesota Twins back in 2010. That was an 8-year, $184 million extension, which gave it $23 million a year. And, of course, it was always JT's goal as the offseason had started to eclipse that mark on average annual value. Second on the list was Buster Posey, who signed a 9-year, $167 million extension with the Giants back in 2013. And now both of these contracts being extensions with their current organizations, this makes JT Realmuto the first free agent signing to reach more than $100 million for the catcher's position. But this was such an interesting negotiation to follow. Being a Phillies fan, this back and forth has been going on for just over a calendar year now till this point. If we rewind back to last offseason, Realmuto in the final year of arbitration went all the way to the courts against the Phillies, but it was always communicated, this is strictly business, no ill will. We don't hate you, you don't hate us. He's just trying to set a standard for the catcher's position moving forward, and ultimately the arbitrator ruled in favor of the Phillies, who awarded him a $10 million contract when JT had requested $12.4. But again, the communication apparently was honest, because here we are a year later, and JT is back with the Phillies. But this offseason, I got to give credit to the Philadelphia organization and now former general manager Matt Klentak, who was in the position of power last year. When JT was looking for an extension, there was talks that JT was looking at, something right around $200 million, $180 million, kind of 7 years, 210 had been floated around. 6 and 180, 175 had certainly been discussed, and Klentak had the wherewithal to look into, the future and forecast that Realmuto's market was never going to materialize at that level. And throw in the coronavirus pandemic, you certainly get another curveball or another variable that both parties had not anticipated, and his market just really did not materialize outside of Philadelphia. And once the Mets went the route of trading for Lindor, signing McCann behind the dish, then you went to Toronto, who, focused their efforts on George Springer, and it really left the Phillies as that big market player who was willing to give the years that JT was looking for. I do not doubt that he could have gotten 1 year or 2 years in $60 million or $30 million per year, but this guy is certainly looking for stability in terms of his career and basically calling a place home and having the length of the deal as well as the AAV, or the average annual value. Philadelphia was the only place that he was going to find that. So in the past week to 2 weeks, it really just seemed like it was a matter of coming to that specific dollar amount. We had seen rumors out there that, just over $100 million had been offered. They were right at 110. And of course, if you're going to sign JT and you're at 110, the fact that you went to 115.5, adding an extra 1.1 a year, really is not a huge deal. If they expect fans to return, they expect revenue to get to pre-pandemic levels, 23.1 a year for the best catcher in baseball certainly feels like a nice deal for both parties. The Phillies didn't overpay. Ideally, if you're the Phillies, you would have liked a 4-year commitment. Realmuto was looking for a 6-year commitment. So again, good business on both sides. Met in the middle for 5 years. Give you $100,000 over what your asking price is, and you got 5 and 115.5. which was the agreement they came to. But, looking into Realmuto, since 2018, he's number 1 in WAR, or wins above replacement, number 1 in RBI, first in stolen bases, second in slugging percentage, second in OPS, and third in home runs. So from the offensive perspective, Realmuto certainly one of the top hitting catchers, and defensively, he has saved 11 runs, according to DFS, which would rank 4th among catchers over that same time frame. So the guy's a top 1 or 2 offensive catcher year in and year out. He's a top 3 or 4 defensive catcher year in and year out, and his framing metrics continue to be positive. He continues to improve defensively as well as managing the pitching staff, because that's one of the most important components that kind of goes overlooked from just a general fan's perspective, is that these guys are calling the game. These guys are managing the pitching staff. These guys are setting up hitters in specific ways. They're looking at scouting reports. They're looking at tendencies. They're looking at weaknesses. Basically, they are the quarterback of the baseball team. Everybody looks at, down and distance in football, zone, man, what are we looking at? Runs, passes, RPOs. Well, that's the catching position, knowing tendencies. How often does he swing in this count? What types of pitches is he looking for in this count? Is he a high ball hitter, low ball hitter? And you utilize that strength to your pitching staff, and to have guys like Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Zach Eflin entering their prime. This is big to continue that camaraderie and that partnership here moving forward into the future. And, of course, we don't have to get into Bryce Harper screaming, sign JT after he's hitting home runs during the pandemic. We had the Fandemic crew, PH, at the beginning of that one. That was outside the stadium, yelling, sign JT. Archie Bradley, who had recently signed, was tweeting out photos from Step Brothers with him and JT and signed JT, and all the fans wanted JT back. So, this move doesn't make the Phillies better, per se, than it did a year ago. It just puts them back on that same wavelength, on that same level. And this was a team, once again, that if it didn't have the worst bullpen in the history of baseball, may have won a few games. I mean, you look at teams that had a lead in the 7th, 8th, or 9th inning. The Phillies were right up there with the Dodgers, right up there with the Braves, the best teams in all of baseball. So this now puts them back into the conversation, back into consideration if certain things go certain ways, that they could get a couple bounces. Guys stay healthy, they get bounce back years or improvement years from guys. They could potentially be in consideration for a wild card. I mean, I'm writing off the division to the Braves once again until somebody knocks them off. The Mets, of course, have gotten a heck of a lot better. The Nationals will look to bounce back with their starting pitching staying healthy, adding some pieces offensively as well. So a very competitive division. And then you have the Marlins, who somehow made the playoffs in the shortened season by finishing just over 500. It was fascinating to watch them continue to compete and improve. So where does this leave the Phillies in regards to the salary cap, is what I call it, but that's taboo in the baseball world, so we'll call it the luxury tax instead here. And all things considered, arbitration, signings, this, that, and the third, the Phillies are right about $180 million committed for 2021, and the luxury tax is set at just about $210 million, so they still have $30 million to spend before they get charged 20 cents on the dollar for going over. And even if they do go over, I mentioned previously when talking about the Yankees that nobody knows if the luxury tax is going to be a thing during the next CBA or collective bargaining agreement. The players hate it because the teams do look at it as a salary cap, and even if they have the money, they don't want to pay the interest on every dollar, so they stay under that or try to get under that to reset the time clock when they could afford it. So that'll be a fascinating storyline to watch, but either way, the Phillies have about $30 million to continue to try to improve their ball club. And once JT signed, the rumors here in Philadelphia was that they have now turned their attention to the shortstop position, was their next hole or next need to fill, with Didi Gregorius being a free agent as well. And there were a handful of names that went off the board this week as well. We're going to discuss all of them here in the next segment, but there were 3 key free agent shortstops who were signed. None of them named Didi Gregorius, and none of them got over a 1-year contract. And this is not by coincidence, or this is not by chance. And there's also a reason that Didi has put his market at the 2-year longevity segment, and that is due to the absolute superstar class that is the free agent shortstop class of 2022. So next summer, the likes of Javier Baez hit the market, Carlos Correa hits the market, Trevor Story hits the market, Corey Seager hits the market, and if they don't reach an extension, which I believe they will, but Francisco Lindor could hit the open market. And if you're Didi, that certainly puts you all the way down as the 6th best shortstop, as opposed to maybe this offseason you were 3rd or 4th, depending on your needs or wants moving forward. So that's why the Phillies, as long as pretty much every other team, is really only looking for a 1-year commitment out of that shortstop spot. And as a Phillies fan, I would love to get Didi back. Last year, he signed for 1 year and $14 million. He was very good for them offensively, left a little bit to be desired on the defensive side. And with the ground ball pitching staff of Nola, Eflin, and Wheeler, who I think were 2nd and 3rd or in ground ball percentage in regards to starting rotations, they're looking for the best defense that they could possibly get. So DD, he's, they're not going to commit 2 years to him, even though that's what he wants. And if that doesn't happen, again, with the other top 3 guys signing, they may transfer their attention to the second base position. And they could potentially move Gene Segura back to shortstop, or you have Scott Kingery, who played shortstop 2 summers ago and improved every day, got better and better by the month. I mean, he's not your stereotypical or homegrown shortstop, but certainly could get the job done. They also have Bryson Stott, a former first-round pick, who should be climbing up the rankings due to being a college prospect. Of course, he didn't get any reps last year because the minor leagues were shut down, but, he could be on the fast track to the big leagues in a year or two. Or the Phillies have a ton of money coming off the books starting next year, could look to sign one of these young guys, could look to sign Baez or Correa or Story and plug them into the middle of this lineup as well. So that's where their energy is going to be placed here over the next couple of days, finding out where they're going in the middle infield. At second base, they could go Jonathan Villar, Jonathan Schoop, Colton Wong has been rumored to be of interest to the Phillies at that position. So that is certainly the next domino that we see falling here locally in Philly. But beyond that, they still need depth on the pitching side of things. I mean, you're looking at those top 3 in the rotation. Spencer Howard pencils in at your number 4, and that leaves Vince Velasquez still as your number 5. And as a Phillies fan, I do not want to watch Vince Velasquez pitch 30 times this year. I just can't do that experiment anymore. The guy takes forever in between pitches, never seems to find the strike zone, and needs to be transitioned to the bullpen where he can change his attitude a bit more and attack hitters with his quality stuff. But there's a lot of bargains still out there potentially on the starting market. I mean, you got James Paxton, Tyjon Walker. There's a ton of arms that are still available. Cole Hamels from the left side. Of course, he was injured last year in Atlanta, but last year there was talk of the Phillies bringing him in. And the first 4 guys I talked about are from the right side. So that's why the names of like Paxton and Hamels are being mentioned. They had interest in J.A. Happ before he signed earlier this offseason in Minnesota. So pitching and shortstop position, potentially center field, could be an option unless they're going with the combination of Adam Hazley and Roman Quinn. Once again out there, Mickey Moniak potentially in the mix, got his major league debut under his belt in 2020, but moves still to be made here in Philadelphia if they want to be considered in the running for the National League East, because I think this move just takes them from possibly the worst team in the division to battling for 3rd or 4th. And with no expanded playoffs, you got to at least finish 2nd to find postseason baseball. And the fact that it'll be 10 years this summer in Philadelphia is certainly driving the locals crazy. But a great move to bring back JT Realmuto for both the team as well as the player. Realmuto gets what he wants, sets the record for AAV. The Phillies are able to spread out his salary, defer a little bit of money to save themselves here in 2021. And I like the 5 years, again, for both parties here. But that'll do it for segment number 2 of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll step aside one more time here for a word from one of our sponsors and a sister show. But when we come back, we'll get you guys updated on all the other signings across Major League Baseball. Things are starting to get busy here as we're under a month from spring training. So stick around. We're going to talk about it all. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the third segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Do myself a favor, do yourself a favor, head over to social media. Check out LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Follow both the GSMC Baseball Podcast as well as the GSMC Podcast Network. The Baseball Podcast will keep you guys up to date on everything going on across Major League Baseball. All the recent signings, all the recent rumors, trades, everything going on here as we are getting ever so close to spring training. And then the Podcast Network will keep you guys up to date on everything else going on, whether it's sports. We got the Super Bowl coming up here in a couple of weeks. NBA is back, the NHL. We got college basketball to discuss. And if you're not into sports, you're into some other hobbies like books, movies, politics, health and fitness, whatever it is you're into, there's a podcast and a page for you. So check those out, please, on social media. You guys will have a lot of fun there. But here in the third segment, we're talking about the additional signings that have taken place across Major League Baseball. Of course, we got done talking about Realmuto and the Phillies. Well, the Phillies, after that signing, turned their attention to the shortstop position because that is their next biggest need. But there was a run on shortstops being signed here this week as well. The top three guys went off the board, or top 3 out of 4, depending on who you're talking to, with the first one being Andrelton Simmons, the 4-time Gold Glove Award-winning shortstop, signed a 1-year, $10.5 million deal with the Minnesota Twins. And I put his market at kind of that $8 to $10 million range, so I believe he got a little bit more than I would have been willing to pay, and that's probably the reason why he did not end up in Philadelphia. But the Twins, they wanted to improve their infield defense, make an addition there to help out the pitching staff, and there's nobody better defensively at the position than Andrelton Simmons right now. He will be penciled into the shortstop position, which then will push Jorge Polanco, over to second base. And some of the metrics and defensive analytics have said that Polanco has lost a step, and ultimately a transition to second base will fit him better moving forward. And this also moves Luis Arraez into the ultimate utility role. And it probably puts an end to the Marwin Gonzalez era there in Minnesota. So Minnesota's infield now, this is the most expensive infield that they've ever had in Minnesota. You got Josh Donaldson over there at third base, Simmons now at shortstop, Polanco at second base, and of course Miguel Sano playing first base for them. And combined, they will make $46.8 million this upcoming season. So the Twins basically looking at everybody else in the division, particularly the Chicago White Sox, and they're looking at those two as being the top-tier guys because the Indians losing Frindor, trading Carrasco, basically opened up the opportunity for that wild card or the top of the division, and Simmons there for a year will certainly improve that defense. So if you're a starting pitcher still on the market and Minnesota's potentially a landing spot for you, that defense behind you certainly made that position a little bit more appealing there in Minnesota. So Simmons to the Twins for 1 year, $10.5 million. Next on the list at the shortstop spot, we have Marcus Semien. Marcus Semien agreed with the Toronto Blue Jays, who continue to stay active. He signed a 1 year, $18 million contract. And honestly, this was above and beyond where I had his market as well. I was thinking 14, 15, 16 million for Semien here, but getting 18 from Toronto, certainly a good deal for the player moving forward. And add Semien to the list of George Springer, Kirby Yates, Robbie Ray, Tyler Chatwood, and Toronto has certainly been very, very busy this offseason. So it'll be fascinating to see how Semien bounces back here because he did struggle in 2020. He also had a rib injury during that season. He hit just .223 with 7 home runs for them, but he had a career year in 2019 where he finished third in MVP voting in the American League. He had a .285 average, 33 home runs, 92 RBIs, certainly one of the best offensive shortstops, and Simmons, more known for his defense in Minnesota, leaves a little bit to be desired offensively, as to where Semien is kind of a more well-rounded shortstop. He's above average defensively, and if he hits like he did in 2019, certainly will be above average offensively, and the Blue Jays are certainly hoping that he can come in and get back to those ranks in 2019. So he had a fantastic run there, 16, 17, 18, 19, and a one-year deal in Toronto is kind of a high-risk, high-reward deal with the amount of money they're paying him, but they won't be tied to him long-term with just a one-year agreement. So I like the addition for the Blue Jays. Put him into the infield along with Bo Bichette, Vlad Guerrero Jr., and you got yourself a pretty solid defense and offensive infield up there across the border, or, maybe in Buffalo once again, and, to be determined on where the Blue Jays are ultimately going to end up playing their games here in 2021. But Toronto staying active, trying to fill holes and compete with the Yankees, who had recently made a couple of moves. The third shortstop to go off the list, when I said 3 out of 4, Didi Gregorius still available. Apparently his market is down to the Reds and Phillies. He's looking for a 2-year deal because Freddie Galvis, he signed a 1-year contract worth $1.5 million deals with the Baltimore Orioles. Galvis, of course, had been in Philadelphia for quite some years. The past couple of seasons was with the Cincinnati Reds. In 2020, he hit .220 with 7 home runs and 16 RBIs, so more known for his defense than his offense. But, Freddie can have a month or two where he gets hot, runs into a couple of, fastballs, pops them out of the park. But Galvis is expected to take over from Jose Iglesias at the shortstop position. Iglesias was traded earlier in December to the LA Angels. So, they had a need at the shortstop position. And based on where Baltimore is in their rebuild, where they are in regards to their economic value into free agency, Freddie Galvis for 1 year and under $2 million is certainly worthy of being a big league player. He can be a professional in that locker room, in that clubhouse, helping the young guys continue along. And, if he hits more on his career average of 247, I think Baltimore's going to be pleasantly surprised. Again, I don't think you're going to get what you got out of him in 2019, where he hit 23 home runs and had 70 RBIs. But I certainly don't think he's going to be down around 220 here as well. So Baltimore kind of goes right in between there, and they got themselves a professional shortstop moving forward. The only fascinating deal is with all these one-year deals at the shortstop position, like I mentioned in the previous segment, with Javier Baez, Carlos Correa, Trevor Story, Corey Seager all becoming free agents next year. You can add Simeon, Simmons, and Freddie Garcia to that list as well, and you get an extremely deep shortstop class next offseason. So it'll be fascinating to see how all of those guys pan out and how the offseason plays out with a potential new collective bargaining agreement happening, and that'll just be fascinating to kind of keep an eye on here moving forward. There were a few other signings. We had the Detroit Tigers. They signed catcher Wilson Ramos to a 1-year, $2 million deal there in Detroit. That is still pending a physical. Ramos played 45 games for the Mets in 2020. He hit .239 with 5 home runs and 15 RBIs. And then in 2019, he hit .288 with 14 homers and 73 RBIs. And Ramos has always been known for his offense more than his defense. He's been a 2-time All-Star in his career. But again, he's a professional hitter, professional at-bats. And for the Tigers in the middle of a rebuild stage and trying to, similarly to Robbie Grossman, who they signed earlier in the offseason, basically show some of these kids what it means to be a professional, what it means to go about your business. You bring in a guy who's been to the All-Star game. He hit .307 with 22 home runs for the Nationals in years past. I do like the addition. Once again, short-term, minimal money. It'll be nice for the Tigers to add some offense to that team here moving forward. So, nice addition for the Tigers, signing catcher Wilson Ramos. Next on the list of signings, we have Brad Hand, the left-handed relief pitcher, gets $10.5 million from the Nationals on a 1-year deal. However, this contract's a little bit different than most because $6.5 million of it will be deferred to future payments without interest. So he will just receive $6.5 million this year, and then he'll get $1.5 million next January, $3.5 million the year after that, and $1.5 million the year after that. So spacing out his payments, if for some reason he falls off and doesn't find a long-term agreement, he'll still get paid for the next 3 years by the Nationals. And, of course, there are some concerns for Hand because his fastball velocity has dropped a little bit over 2 miles an hour over the past 2 seasons. He averaged only 91.4 last year. He spoke about how it was a positive that he learned how to pitch while throwing that velocity, but he is still working to get back up to where he was in years past. And, he led the majors with 16 saves and certainly figured out how to get it done without blowing the ball past people anymore. And for a guy who was having a 1-year, $10 million option declined, he finds 10.5 out there on the market. But once again, that 10.5 will be paid over the course of 3 seasons and not just 1 moving forward. We also have the Cleveland Indians. They re-signed second baseman Cesar Hernandez. Hernandez signed a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Indians. He was a Gold Glove winner in 2020. The first second baseman to win a Gold Glove for the Indians in quite some time there, so they were very impressed with his defense as well as his offense. And Hernandez, being in Philadelphia for the longest time, is just very steady as she goes. You're not going to get probably an all-star season, but winning the first Gold Glove since Roberto Alomar for the Indians certainly was a positive for them. He's a big average guy, doesn't walk a lot, not a ton of power. He hit .283 last year during the shortened season, but the .981 field percentage with only 4 errors, and he saved 4.7 defensive runs above average. Certainly lended himself to get a 1-year deal back with Cleveland and continue his career out there for the Indians. So the Indians, they acquired a handful of middle infielders in the Lindor deal, but these guys are kind of on the cusp, up and coming, and I do believe Hernandez will be able to continue in their development and help bring them along. The last signing we have is Tommy La Stella, the second baseman, formerly of the Oakland Athletics, as well as the Los Angeles Angels. It looks like he is in agreement with the San Francisco Giants on a 3-year deal. No word yet on the money involved with the contract, but certainly a nice signing for the Giants. He was very good for the Angels last year, as well as the A's. He finished the year hitting .289 over the course of the season. Very good defensively as well. He was, second in regards to strikeouts, only behind DJ LeMahieu. He struck out only 12 times in 196 at-bats. And this aligns exactly with what Gabe Kapler and the analytics movement is telling you out there in San Francisco. Put the ball in play, get on base, continue to make contact, because obviously everybody with the home run or strikeout swing that's been overtaking Major League Baseball, this will be a nice change of pace out there in San Francisco. So they're very happy with this agreement. Before the Angels, the Braves, Cubs, that's where La Stella was. And I think San Francisco fans listening to this are going to enjoy Tommy La Stella. That does it for the signings, but there was one trade as well this week, and it was a little bit fascinating because it was between the hated rivals Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees. The Yankees shipped out right-handed relief pitcher Adam Ottavino to the Red Sox for cash and a player to be named later. The Yankees also sent over a prospect who was ranked number 24 in their minor league system, right-handed pitcher Frank German, who will be sent that way. And the connection there to Boston is that Chaim Bloom, the new general manager, was a big fan of Hermain's when he was with coming out of the draft. He went in the 4th round of the Yankees, but apparently Tampa Bay at that time was very high on him. So Chaim Bloom essentially gets his guy a few years later for the Red Sox. And this was the first trade between these two teams since 2014. And from a Yankees perspective, it was certainly a salary dump based on what we had talked about. He got a $9 million salary this year, Ottavino. So they will move that off the books, which will allow them to kind of engage talks with Brett Gardner, potentially some other relief pitching options. Jeremy Jeffers, Alex Colomé, Darren O'Day, still out there on the market, probably won't be receiving that $9 million price tag that came with Ottavino. And from Boston's perspective, they get a nice solid relief pitcher as well as a prospect who, their general manager was a big fan of for the past couple of years. So a good deal for both teams. This allows the Yankees to make some additional moves, and this improves Boston's roster both today as well as potentially down the road if Frank Germain pans out like they believe he will. So an active week this week in Major League Baseball with a run on shortstop. And, now it's basically up to the big fish to figure out where they're ultimately going to end up. And all eyes right now are currently on Trevor Bauer and which direction he could head in. So we'll step aside here now one last time for a word from one of our sponsors and a word from our sister shows. But when we come back, I'll get you guys up to date on all the latest news, notes, rumors, everything coming out of Major League Baseball as spring training is coming down the pike here. So things are starting to heat up. Teams are starting to make moves, and it's becoming a lot more fun to discuss with you guys. But that'll do it for segment number 3. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Thanks again for listening, and welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Let's get you guys up to date on all the news, notes, rumors going on across Major League Baseball. Well, since I recorded segment number 3 here just moments ago, and I mentioned 3 relief pitchers who the Yankees could be interested in, they made me look extremely smart by coming to an agreement with Darren O'Day. I talked about him being an option now that they moved on from Ottavino. Well, it's come out here in the past couple of minutes that an agreement is pending a physical, and it looks like Darren O'Day, the right-handed sidearm relief pitcher, will be joining the New York Yankees. So, of course, the Yankees move on from Ottavino to clear some cap space, and they're going to fill that hole the very next day by adding Darren O'Day to the bullpen corps here moving forward. So, fascinating how things are happening by the minute out here, and we're going to keep you guys up to date on everything going on across Major League Baseball. So, outside of players, rumors, and notes, let's touch on a recent proposal that Major League Baseball had sent over to the Players Association regarding the 2021 season and some rules that have yet to be determined. Well, apparently the Players Association has rejected a proposal that would have installed the universal DH into the National League in exchange for an expanded postseason and additional money. So, what does this exactly mean? Why would the players turn down the DH for the expanded postseason? Well, because one, the league knows that they're essentially going to win this agreement because basically the fact that adding 15 DH positions to, again, half the league and is what considered a quote-unquote low-skill position, according to owners, general managers, because, again, no defense involved, just offensives, those 15 new starting jobs won't necessarily translate into kind of big spending or rampant spending across the National League, especially in this offseason when people are still counting pennies and dealing with the economic fallout of the coronavirus. So this is kind of fascinating where the players are basically saying, yeah, that's not a fair trade because the amount of money that the league is going to make with an expanded postseason. And there were reports that Major League Baseball was close to selling its broadcasting rights to additional playoff rounds to ESPN. This deal is slated to begin in 2022, which again kind of makes you think that in the new CBA, this is certainly something that MLB is going to want and not waver on. But the players are going, no, you're going to make a ton more money than us here in 2021. And when I say us, I mean literally 15 individuals. So you as a league and all 32 teams are going to get richer, and we're only going to get about 15 people to get paid maybe a little bit more than they would. So the Players Association shut that down pretty quickly. And if they can't come to an agreement, they will go back to the original CBA, so there won't be expanded playoffs. The DH will only be in the American League, and it'll be kind of fascinating to go back to that with 4 playoff teams on each side and no longer 5, only 1 wild card team, which as a Phillies fan, I would like to see the expanded postseason due to what's going on in Atlanta, New York, Washington, Philadelphia, Miami. It's certainly going to be tough to be that only 1 squad who gets in, and even in the NL East. I mean, if you're the Braves, Mets, and Nationals, only 2 of those teams maximum would be able to get into the postseason. So it certainly makes things a bit more interesting. So conversation and negotiations continue to be a little contentious between both sides. Nobody really, willing to give in order to get, and both sides still kind of remain selfish in their requests. And it's just going to set up a fascinating negotiation and discussion at the end of this regular season when the 10-year CBA runs out from their 2011 terms and discussions. But no DH as of now in the National League, no expanded playoffs, and personally, I don't think those things will be implemented by the time the year starts. So I think we're going to go back to the old school rules here in Major League Baseball for this summer. But now to the news and notes, some rumors happening out there. I mentioned it. We'll start with Trevor Bauer. Apparently, recent reports have now come out that the New York Mets are, quote, favorites for Trevor Bauer. There's been some conversation around that there is a deal north of $30 million per year. Now, of course, Garrett Cole holds the league record for average annual value for a pitcher at $36 million a year, and Bauer was looking to be competitive with that style of market. So I do not believe he'll exceed Garrett Cole, but him getting at least $30 million is certainly a fascinating development here over the course of at least 4 seasons. And I mean, just penciling in Bauer into that Mets rotation, Jacob deGrom, Carlos Carrasco, you have Marcus Stroman there as well, and potentially Thor, Noah Syndergaard if he comes back off an injury. And that rotation is absolutely loaded. Add Lindor to that offense, and man, the New York Mets are certainly going to be a team to mess with in the National League East, because the Toronto Blue Jays seem to be out on the Bauer sweepstakes, which really leaves the Mets and then the quote-unquote mystery team that is staying out there, and we're going to hear that a couple of times here over the next 10 minutes. But the mystery team I would pencil in as the LA Angels, as well as the LA Dodgers, having conversations with Bauer. Both of those teams are looking for more of a short-term style of contract, maybe 2 to 3 seasons, and that's where it certainly would make the Mets the favorite if they are willing to expand and give that 4th year still at $30+ million. But with Realmuto signed, with Springer signed, Bauer remains kind of that lone big fish still available out there to potentially be added here in the next couple of weeks before pitchers and catchers are expected to report. So, man, the Mets just continue to be in on everybody, continue to be spending money. Them in Toronto have gone the opposite of direction of most teams in regards to spending money and trying to improve their ball clubs. But that rotation, deGrom, Bauer, Stroman, goodness gracious, throw in Carrasco as a number 4, and that's going to be a tough out for anybody in the postseason if they were to make it that far. So keep an eye out on that for Trevor Bauer here in the next couple of days, potentially agreeing with the Mets. It'll be a fascinating development if it does happen. The next trade rumor we have here is the Chicago Cubs. Apparently the Cubs have slowed down the Chris Bryant trade market. They've informed Chris Bryant that he will be returning to the Cubs unless they get a, quote, sweetheart, end quote, type of deal. And yes, there are still conversations happening. People have still discussed the New York Mets being involved, the Blue Jays being involved once again, because Chris Bryant does have a price tag of just over $19 million coming with him here this offseason. The Atlanta Braves had been rumored to be in contact earlier, the Washington Nationals as well, but it certainly seems like the Cubs have kind of soured on the idea of just shipping out Bryant in return to get prospects, similar to the Yu Darvish deal, where people were trying to figure out what the heck they were doing with San Diego. So I think kind of that pushback and that feedback on the market and the public lended them to be a bit more hesitant on just shipping Chris Bryant out of town, even though he'll be a free agent this next offseason. And it certainly doesn't look like he will be returning to Chicago, but it could mean that he could be a mid-year trade acquisition. I mean, again, last year Bryant struggled, hitting just over 200, but he's a former National League MVP, and if he starts out this season, March, April, May, having himself a good summer, hitting back close to that 280, driving the ball, then the Cubs may get that sweetheart offer from the teams out there. But also, it'll only be a half-a-year commitment for the receiving team. So I don't know if they're going to go above and beyond giving those prospects when there's no guarantee that Bryant would re-sign with whichever club trades for him. So I think the asking price will go down a little, maybe in quantity, but not as quite much in quality. So you could get 2 or 3 prospects that are better prospects as opposed to 4 or 5 who are more mid to lower term here if you're the Cubs and you're asking price around Chris Bryant. Another trade rumor coming out of the NL Central, Josh Hader, left-handed relief pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers, arguably the best relief pitcher in baseball, if not top 5, certainly. He continues to still be available, but there is a, quote, overwhelming, end quote, asking price on what they're asking for Hader, and this has driven off some potential suitors. Now, there were rumors that the Yankees could be involved, but this was prior to the Darren O'Day signing that took place here on the 27th. And, I don't think that the Yankees are going to want to give up 3, 4, maybe 5 prospects in order to bring Josh Hader to town. But the appeal with Hader, as opposed to Bryant, is that Hader is under contract for 2 additional seasons at a very reasonable price. I believe he's at right around $6 million this year, upwards to 10 here moving in the future. But again, there's a bit more stability and a bit more longevity that will come with trading for Josh Hader than would come for Chris Bryant only potentially being in your ball club for a summer. So Hader himself, I think he's the biggest piece still left out there when it comes to the relief market. But in regards to just paying capital or money instead of prospects, that's where things certainly get complicated with Hader. But again, the Brewers are still listening, and Hader can be had for the right price. The Brewers are also rumored to be interested in outfielder Eddie Rosario. They're looking to upgrade their outfield position. Rosario was cut loose by the Twins in a cost-cutting measure for Minnesota. He's a nice little left fielder, switch hitter, has some pop. Been an all-star in the past, and Milwaukee is looking to bring in some offense as they're looking to kind of retool and rebuild the roster. That could certainly be a nice addition for Milwaukee, but, other teams circling the wagon out there. We heard the Giants interested in Rosario, so there is a market for him, and it'll be fascinating to which point that ultimately drives his price tag here moving forward. The next rumor is Colton Wong, the second baseman formerly of the St. Louis Cardinals. His market is starting to heat up, and it is kind of fascinating how you can see the tiers of free agents where the top guys, okay, this is who everybody's involved with. How much are they going to get? Where are they going to go? All of a sudden, there's a run on shortstops. Simeon, Simmons, Galvis, Didi probably next, and now people are transitioning their focus over to the second base position because middle infielders, typically you have a utility guy you can swing either way. So in the case of the Phillies, they've transitioned now to checking in on Colton Wong because they can move Scott Kingery back to the shortstop position. But the Phillies aren't the only ones rumored to be interested. There are a ton of other teams checking in on Wong. Of course, the Cardinals aren't going to let him walk without having discussions. You have the Detroit Tigers having conversations. It's also rumored that the Seattle Mariners, the Tampa Bay Rays, and then even the Chicago Cubs are interested in having convos. And the Cubs, losing Baez here moving forward, would be looking at Wong as a potential 2 to 3 year replacement. Similarly with the Phillies, looking kind of short term, but Colton Wong, a professional infielder, he's been very good for St. Louis the last number of years at that second base spot. Certainly a professional hitter and a guy who knows how to win, coming from a great organization. And he is now kind of next on that tier where people are looking, going, okay, Didi or Colton Wong, which way do we want to go here in our middle infield? And ultimately, can we make a decision? So we could get some action on Colton Wong here by the end of the week or by the end of the weekend, depending on when you're listening to this. The last rumor we have out there involves Justin Turner. Justin Turner, it seems that a reunion with the LA Dodgers is becoming more and more imminent. There were a few mystery teams out there There was talk that the Blue Jays could be interested, but since they signed Marcus Semien for $18 million, it certainly seems that that $20 to $22 million a year that Turner is looking for is not going to be within the budget for the Blue Jays, so you can cross them off the list. And basically that leaves the Dodgers involved. There's rumors that the Brewers are in on Justin Turner, and then there is that third quote-unquote mystery team that we spoke about that, nobody can identify, but everybody knows is out there. Everybody's talking to everybody. We're hearing word of a third team, and, none of these beat writers or day-to-day guys have been able to figure out which one. But again, the Brewers don't have a ton of money, as well as Turner has made it known that he wants to play for a World Series contender. So the LA Dodgers would certainly fit that mold over the Milwaukee Brewers. We don't know who the mystery team is and where they stand in the standings or their goals this year. So if Turner's probably willing to take, 16, 18, 20 million, as opposed to that 22, 24, 26 that he's ultimately looking for, I believe Turner returning to the Dodgers 2 years, $39, $38 million is ultimately going to be the best situation for both parties there. So Turner can keep chasing his ring at the end of his career. The Dodgers have the money to spend short term. So if they're looking at a 2-year pact, I think ultimately that one does get done out there in LA. But that's really it on the rumor mill. Of course, there are still a ton of free agents available, a ton of relief pitchers available, but things continue to develop slowly when it comes to the pitching market. Starters still out there, and a ton of teams need starting pitching. So I think they're waiting for that market to kind of stabilize and come down, and then we could see continue to see a flurry of action here moving forward. But that'll wrap things up for today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks for listening again, everyone. If you guys enjoyed today's show, be a friend, tell a friend out there, share us, send a text, post it on social media. At the very least, please rate and review the podcast, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Once again, I know I had a hot take there in segment number 1 regarding the Hall of Fame voting. So if you guys have a comment, give me a shout. Let me know how you feel. But if not, certainly post us, share us with your friends, check out social media. That goes a long way for continuing to help us grow here within the market moving forward. But that'll do it for today, January 28th, another episode in the books. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I had a lot of fun out here discussing, and I think we're going to have a lot more activity to talk about between today and Monday's episode. So thanks for listening again, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week out there, and I'll talk to you guys on Monday.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.